Welcome to another episode of Vulgarian Recommends. Today we are gonna discuss Vengeance is Mine from 1979, directed by Shohei Imamura. So this film is based on a book of the same name by Ryuzo Saki, and the story is based on a real-life serial killer named Akira Nishiguchi, but in the film his name was changed to Iwao Enokizu. And Ken Ogata, the legendary Ken Ogata, plays Iwao Enokizu in this film. So this might be Imamura's most famous film, or at least one of his most famous films. And if I give a quick plot synopsis, we of course already established that it's about a serial killer, but the film does this kind of non-linear story where we explore the serial killer's life, how he kills people, his relationship with his family, a little bit of his childhood, and how he tries to escape from the police, and there's a bit of that kind of police procedural here as well. But the narrative jumps around quite a bit, but I think it's still pretty easy to follow, even though it has that non-linear structure, and the film has that naturalist kind of gritty 70s style to it, so you can definitely immediately see that it's from the 70s, even if you didn't know it was from the 70s. And Imamura is a director that I got introduced to very early on, kind of when I got into Japanese cinema for the first time. Imamura was one of the first directors that I heard about, along with Kurosawa and Ozu and Mizoguchi. And Imamura was probably the first new wave director that I heard about. And he's maybe outside Japan one of the most, or if not the most, kind of famous Japanese new wave directors. Maybe because his work is better available than the work of many of the other new wave directors, as there have been lots of physical media releases for Imamura films in different countries, and you can often see the films in streaming and even on places like YouTube and stuff, so they are usually quite easy to find. I've seen 7 films from Imamura. I think he made like 25 or so. He worked from the 50s up until the 2000s, so he had a long career where he made lots of different stuff. He's always been a director that I was very excited to get into his work, but then some of his films were kind of slight disappointments to me. I've liked all of his films, but they usually don't connect with me like in a very kind of personal level, but I can always tell that these are kind of very well made films. But Vengeance is Mine is one of my favorites, along with The Insect Woman and Profound Desires of the Gods. But yeah, a great thriller.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very great thriller. Yes, I mean, I couldn't look away when watching it. So I was hooked from the beginning all the way to the end. And the runtime is not short, so it's 2 hours and 20 minutes. So I expected actually, oh, the film might drag at points given the timeline, but it's just paced very well. And like you said, it doesn't follow linear structure at times. It jumps time and place and all that, but it's constructed really well, and it has a coherence rather than kind of creating confusion.
And the film is also very kind of ambiguous in some senses, that we don't kind of it doesn't hit you in the head with what are the motives of the killer and things like that, but it kind of leaves some details ambiguous, and yeah, I really appreciated that fact that it doesn't kind of hit you in the head with everything. And I think the film, even though it's a serial killer film, it definitely has like way wider themes as well. It's not just about like a serial killer killing people and the hunt to get that serial killer. But it's about kind of wider societal themes that we will get into later on. And I think this is also probably a very influential film. I think I can see lots of influence from this in like later Japanese thrillers and also maybe Korean thrillers that are about like serial killers and stuff. Like Sion Sono, for example, made two films that kind of remind me of this a little bit. One is called Goldfish and the other one is called The Forest of Love. And both of those movies have serial killers in them, and the characters remind me a bit of the Iwao Enogizu from this film. And here in the beginning we often talk about like who would we recommend this film to. And I think in the film cinephile circles there are lots of people who love thrillers and who loves these serial killer films, because I think people are like very fascinated by serial killers. And actually one of the first things that I got interested in cinema was like psychological thrillers and these types of thrillers that explore the mind of a serial killer or a psychopath. I've always found those like very interesting. So I think people who like thrillers, who love serial killer films, who love gritty 70s films, I think you guys would really enjoy this film. And of course this is an essential part of Japanese cinema as well, so if you love Japanese cinema and haven't seen this film yet, I would highly recommend it to people like that too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a great thriller. So people who like thrillers, people who like true crime stories, kind of trying to understand psychologies of individuals, like you said, who commit sometimes atrocious and disturbing acts, and trying to kind of understand events and maybe even motivations. This is definitely an interesting one. And I think like what is really interesting about it is that Imamura is, as I understand it, he was, prior to this, he had kind of left filmmaking and he was just making television documentaries on different topics. And so this film seems to employ some of that approach of a seeming documentary almost. It's almost like you are watching a real life capturing of these dynamics, except you get access to things that you wouldn't have access to in a documentary. Like you would not necessarily see the kind of the family life of the person always. It depends how much access is there, and it depends on what time period that documentary is being made. If it's not being made contemporary, you wouldn't have that information. So it is this nice cross between something that seems like a documentary, but it's also clearly a creative work. I think the most important thing there, indicating that's a creative work, like you said, is changing the name of the main character to Iwao is Imamura saying, okay, this is a interpretation, this is a creative work, and while these events happened and some culprit committed them, this is kind of my approach to try to understand what went into that. And what went into that, like you said, it goes beyond the psychological. So that's what I really enjoyed about this movie, was it wasn't really trying to go and make very clean psychological determinations and kind of clinically just applying and trying to explain away every single form of behavior. There's a kind of messiness to the whole thing that makes it feel much more unique and fresh, and even something that's unplanned and kind of happening on the spot.
Yeah, and it's important to say that, of course, even though it's based on a real life character, that it's a fictionalized account of that, and not everything that happened in the movie happened real life. And obviously in these movies, in these serial killer movies, and even in this movie, like the serial killer, like kind of how charismatic he is and kind of how his personality comes across in the film. Like I don't think serial killers often are like that in real life. But you also mentioned the documentary style, and I think you can even see that bit in the violent scenes and in the sex scenes, because this doesn't kind of stylize the murders or the sex scenes, but they are very kind of raw and brutal in many ways, and they aren't stylized or made to look beautiful or interesting, but they are just kind of shown as they are for the most part. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's another very um, well done part of the movie. It is that improvised feeling when it comes to the kills. It doesn't seem like this has been previously choreographed and fully planned. So it has this you get a kind of realness to the moment where you you get a sense of this person while they're committing their act, how they might be behaving, or where they might be hesitating, or where they might feel kind of some fear to act, or even some immediate revulsion to what they're currently engaged in. And so this film does a really good job of almost showing someone as they're going through the process of becoming a killer. So it's like it takes away from this that this person was just, we have this idea, born to kill, or psychopathy or sociopathy, and that doesn't mean that doesn't exist in the world, but sometimes it's depicted very clean cut. You kind of come in where it's not messy, and the person is seen as this kind of meticulous killer and very structured and very driven to one purpose, whereas in Iwao seems like a much more messier person. I think you see how lost he is too in this world that he's slowly creating for himself, yet he cannot get off the ride, which is provides a very interesting puzzle as someone viewing the movie and being an audience member, and starting to think about why that may be, and what the drives actually are, or is it just a path that just slowly keeps opening up as soon as you enter it, that as soon as you decide to become a killer and kill, it's almost like this magnetism that keeps attracting you, or is it a series of accidents because of his immediate needs and his inability to know how to satisfy those needs. So there's this big puzzle there in the film to kind of journey with and explore.
Yeah, I think we are now in the spoiler territory, so just saying to the viewers, but yeah, it's not kind of clear in the film kind of fully like what are his motivations to kill. Like he just like randomly kills those people and takes their money and goes away, and that's it. So it kind of feels like it's kind of like the Dark Passenger, like Dexter, that he just has this kind of need to kill, some kind of psychological need to kill, and this person obviously has a kind of a daddy issue, so he didn't have Harry Morgan to guide him to kill the bad people, but he just kills kind of random people. And his father is of course a Catholic, and there are quite a lot of interesting things in his character as well, like his relationship with Ivao's wife, like it's pretty transgressive and weird as well. And so there are definitely these types of things from Ivao's childhood and in his family that maybe have affected him in a way that he started to kill. Although it's not that clear in the film, that it doesn't really make a point that it's all about like childhood trauma or something, but his relationship with his father is a very, very essential part of the movie, and towards the end there is this scene where they have this discussion as well. And I think the kind of title of the movie is also interesting in some ways. Like, what is he avenging? Like is there like a point to his quote unquote vengeance, or like why he kills people? Like, is it again his past or the society around him, or is it just a psychological need or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah, what you're saying is very interesting because this is one of those films that watching it through does not make it um, or does not take away from the need to watch it again. Like it's a film very much that when you get to the end, you kind of want to go back and think about it because and watch it through. So it's a film you can keep watching through and through. It's that I think that's where it's unique as a thriller, that it's one of those that you can watch over and over because it's not really about solving the mystery, but kind of observing and thinking about all these elements that you're talking about and what that means, like what kind of impact it has uh, on an individual. So like there's since we are in spoiler territory, so I think one significant kind of there's a significant point, but that's much more near the end, where he's conversing with the mother of the woman he's now in a relationship with, and the mother we find out has killed someone before. In fact, she's even spent time in prison for it, and she mentions thoroughly enjoying her experience killing someone because she was talking about how much she disliked this person and how much of a satisfaction it was to her to actually kill that person. And he responds and says, Iwao responds and says, well, I never enjoyed any of my kills. And she says to him, well, maybe you never killed anyone that you actually wanted to kill. And I think that the person who you wanted to kill or someone you should have killed. And so this opens up a whole layer because this film, as you're saying, has so many elements. And I think the first element I look at is that in Imamura's films, we are looking at a certain rung of society often, right? He is concentrating on everyday people, people who are invisible, people we don't think about, people we don't even consider how they make their livelihood, how they survive, how they develop a sense of like self-esteem, how they develop confidence, how did they acquire skills in life, how do they cope with life, how do they love, all these things. So it's like here's a person, but it's within this whole construct now that we're looking at, which is this part of society, the people that are often invisible to us, or sometimes people who are inexplicable to us. So one thing this could mean is that when we look at his pattern of kills, he is killing people from his own social strata for most of it. For most of it. And I think there's this departure, and I don't know if it means anything. But for the most part, he is kind of going after people you could say he's like, or he shares a common destiny with to a certain extent, if you are kind of looking at it in sociological terms, some determinism there. And by him exerting this act of violence and show of power is almost like showing his own vulnerability and weakness because ultimately he's powerless. So he's not actually killing anyone he should be killing, which is whoever is oppressing him in that way or oppressing his class in that way, and he's just killing amongst his own class to kind of feel some kind of dominance and almost play God, because vengeance is mine, says the Lord, I guess in the Bible. So vengeance is mine could also mean, yeah, he's trying to play God He's trying to have a sense of power over the the meek almost.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the psychological kind of common factors of doing something like this is to feel powerful. But there are also moments when he kills, like when he kind of has to get something, like when he kills the lawyer. Like I think he gets his like apartment, and then he obviously starts kind of saying to people that he's a professor and stuff like that. So he's conning people and lying to them as well. So, but there's like also you talked about a little bit about like him being like him as an individual, but I think there's like a kind of this societal thing here as well, like of the individual versus the society, and kind of how these types of extreme individuals, like how they kind of blend in the world and how disruptive they can be to the order. And this is of course the kind of most extreme version of that, when we have a serial killer who just kills people and who doesn't care about people and who just uses people and kills them and stuff like that. And of course with the societal critique, there's obviously this kind of post-war identity thing here as well, with that kind of Japanese alienation here, because we see these other people here too, and they don't really have a kind of like they don't have much of a future. They just exist and survive, and they feel quite disillusionment of the society. And I think that's why they also kind of turn to this serial killer even after they find out that he's a serial killer. They still want to be with him. So that kind of shows that ultimate alienation as well, that you don't care that your lover or a person you know is a serial killer. So,
Yes, that level of vulnerability and even supplication and acceptance is definitely something that's depicted really well, in the film itself and in the events that we're observing. So you're right, and there are like lots of like things you're mentioning that are like very interesting when you watch this film, and they seem to impress themselves upon the viewer. I mean, one thing you said is um, where he kills the lawyer, and I think that that's to me is an interesting part, because that to me that might be a departure from what I was saying earlier, where he's generally preying on the vulnerable, and the vulnerable is really himself, in a way mirrors of himself, something he can see himself in. Except when he kills the lawyer, it seems he's kind of up against the ceiling, like he's almost about to transgress, and he's now going to go after people who have a little more power than than himself, or the people he's known, or his family members. Yet he's also preying on someone who's older, isolated, living alone. So it creates this kind of ponderable question about, is it vulnerability just in class that kind of he has a sense for, like he can smell the vulnerability because he himself is vulnerable, and then he has to act uh, in violence against vulnerability, like because of he despises it in himself, so he despises it in anyone else. Um, so is that the case, or when he's kind of taking lawyer identity, and then he's taking, like you said, a professor identity, he's trying to role play. He wants to know what it's like to be someone with a little more power or agency in this world, versus where he comes from, and the people he knows, including his own father.
yeah, but I think like what you say about the him killing like the people who are like him and people who are more powerful than him, but there's of course that scene where he talks to his father, and you can like think about his father being kind of more powerful to him than him, and kind of in his life that he feels that his father has so much influence on his life, but they talk about how he cannot kill his father, that he's not a man enough to kill his father. So that kind of adds another layer to this discussion of him killing powerful people or not killing powerful people. But
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, him becoming a kind of a professor, like it gives him that kind of it gives him a chance to explore that type of upper class or upper middle class identity and how it feels, and he also gets kind of respect from the people around him because he's a professor. But then he kind of in his discussions always kind of returns to the animalistic desires, you could say, because when he goes to the prostitute and he's talking that yeah, even professors have these drives, like I aim for knowledge, but yeah, I still need to have
Yeah.
sex as well and stuff like that. So, and I think in Imamura's films in general, like these kind of animalistic desires and drives are a big thing that he always explores, whether it's violence or sex, and of course Japanese New Wave. There's lots of rape in these films as well, and there is also a rape scene in this film. So there is this types of animalistic things in kind of this whole movement, but also in Imamura's filmography in general. So.
Very much so. Like all you're saying, I think that that part of it is, I guess, for maybe some people watching, it might turn them off. That how much Imamura embraces all that and wants to show you all that, uh, and it also adds. I mean, it adds so many elements because for me, I know we keep saying, okay, this movie's describing it as a thriller, and generally that's the general description. But I think what's this film is not necessarily a thriller. It's not necessarily a biopic. It's not necessarily a documentary. It's not necessarily a pure drama. So it's like it's taking elements to create the picture Imamura wants to create, and like in that you get this profound sadness. So that like when the film finished, I felt a profound sadness watching that film. I felt sad. Like I felt um, because you see these struggles, right? These invisible struggles that you don't really think about. You don't think about how people get by, and also how one event can set people back for their whole life, or they can be just stuck in something and they just can't get out of it, no matter how hard they try. And I think that as much as Iwao is this, yes, this kind of serial killer and violent person, he's not really swindling for millions and millions, and he's kind of killing off the cuff sometimes and all that. And in a way, he's the exact same. He's someone who's not able to escape whatever he's trying to escape, or whatever he's trying to get away from. There's an impossibility of being able to leave this world, and then the world can maybe feel claustrophobic at times too. Yet at the same time, Imamura, by showing all these instincts, like you're saying, all the animalistic instincts and all that, is contrasting nicely with the other aspect, which is look at the survival instinct that becomes present when people are in these circumstances. Like they don't just turn around and die. Like they find ways to survive. It's a whole different thing. We talk about surviving requiring preying on things. Well, he's not necessarily, I don't think, saying that's good or that's bad, but I think that having that survival instinct, that little bit of animal nature, that desire, that drive is also something positive, not necessarily uh, negative.
Yeah, this is kind of like the ultimate expression of survival instinct, that you kind of do whatever you kind of can to survive, to kill people, take their money, to con people. But of course, all of it is just to survive. Like at first, it's maybe the money, but then it's also just to, you need the new identity to escape from the police and stuff. But here we also see how the society kind of can turn on the individual, because of course when you like put his face into the news and everything, that's kind of how these people are getting caught. It's not the police individuals like catching these killers, but it's just you put their face into the media and then they get these, the police get these tips, and how this is kind of a way of how society destroys these, you could say, unique individuals. Yeah. But what was I also gonna say? Yeah, you also mentioned earlier there in your comment that kind of how it's not just a thriller or a documentary or whatever, but kind of one interesting tonal thing here as well is the kind of dark humor at points. I've read from some reviews how people talk about the dark humor. To be honest, like I didn't get that as much myself, but I saw that from many people, and yeah, there's definitely some dark humor. Like I don't know if I know how to explain that one scene that was kind of funny, but I think he's at the Iwa Enokisu is at the house of his father, and I think his wife is there too. But then he's kind of like leaving the house, but then then there's this kind of oh god, what's the word? Oh god, what's the word? That's like in farms you have these wooden things like to so that the horses etc. don't kind of escape the place. Like what's that? Fences? Yeah, fences. Yeah, there's these fences, and he keeps doing this, that he like looks like he's left the house, but then he suddenly his head appears like on top of the fence and stuff. Yeah, it's hard to explain, but that was kind of a funny scene in my opinion.
Yeah, so you're talking about the humor. So the humor is, yeah, there's definitely humor there in the way he's acting a lot of times. Even like what you said when he goes in and he says, "Oh," when he like the example that you gave where he's like, he's a professor and he's like, "Oh, I may be uh, about the life of the mind and doing my learning, but I still have like insatiable desire, or like that's all humorous, right? It's funny, and while to a certain extent he is funny, and I think that's part of his charisma, right? That so I think that's all written in there, or things where there's that landowner and then he's basically sleeping with the Haru, and then he's like he gets a foot cramp, like and he's like, "Oh, massage my foot, I got a foot cramp." Like these things are like you said, they're like humorous, but
And it has a bit of a kind of soap opera scandalous thing there with like the father like being interested in in his son's wife and stuff. And of course his wife Kazoku, I think her name is, like how she's so attracted to like her husband's father and stuff. So that's kind of full on kind of soap opera trash that you would see in like awful like tabloid newspapers and stuff like that. Yeah. So I think people might find that like very interesting or funny. Yeah.
well, what I liked, or I think what is also captivating is the whole, and I guess by this point maybe it becomes almost tropish, because we've seen many of these thrillers and serial killer stories, but the he is quite a captivating character. So from when the movie opens, because I think the movie opens very well, where there's where they're taking him away in the car, and right away we're getting a flavor of when he's on his kind of charm offensive, how much he can pull you in. So even with the police officers, they're almost like not reacting negative to him because he's being a bit flippant, and he's making jokes, and he seems to be completely comfortable with the fact that he's caught, and he's even making comments about, oh well, lucky you, you're gonna have this birthday, like I'm gonna be dead by 40 or whatever it is he's saying at the beginning. I forget what specific age he says. And yet when we watch the movie and we get to certain points, or throughout the movie, you get this sense that he has a fear and foreboding about getting caught and then ultimately being put to death. So he is not so comfortable with dying as maybe he's showing at the end, or oh, which is actually the beginning, or he's grown to accept his fate. So I don't know what you thought about that.
Well, I think that kind of partly reminded me of the ending as well, when they throw his bones in the air, and
Oh yeah,
that then it kind of, like, the picture gets stuck, that the bones don't kind of drop to the uh, ground or whatever, and that kind of shows that, yeah, he was executed, but maybe the kind of stain of his life, or the kind of legacy of his life, will live on in a way, or whatever. So yeah, he died, the person died, but he didn't die in the memories of people or whatever. So yeah.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. They'll never get rid of him, and then we'll never get rid of him. Or maybe that kind of energy cannot be rid from society because society is built on that as well. I mean, society creates that, but by creating these circumstances and these power dynamics and all that, that you create it, so you're never kind of rid of this thing. But I'm also interested because, like I told you, I watched the commentary. So one thing that was interesting is that Tony Raines was talking about how Imamura himself kind of spent a lot of time, even in his youth, like around these kinds of situations, with crime and bootlegging and prostitution and all that was going on in post-war Japan. And some of those situations are depicted a little bit in Pigs and Battleships. That he, in a way, championed this criminal individual in a way because he thought, like, in art, that's what makes art good, and at the same time, there were aspects of those individuals that he felt made life interesting and almost society interesting, I guess he would say. So I wonder with that ending, because that ending is somewhat humorous too, like you said, like this strange throwing of the bones and then freezing the screen, and just the look on the dad's face and the daughter-in-law's face is like it's comedic almost, right? It looks like physical comedy. It doesn't look like this tragic or this fear or this uh, dread, but it's almost like, oh God, we're still not rid of him. It almost has an almost comedic feeling.
And bones are kind of like the foundation of what it means to be a human, and they're kind of very elemental. So maybe you could think that his kind of spirit is also kind of very foundational in humanity in general and in the society in general, because the bones stick there. So yeah, if you really want to start analyzing what the bones actually are and stuff.
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't think about that. So bones are kind of foundational, but they're the structure. They are what form, and I guess you could say, yeah, the kind of form and hold the flesh. So the bones are left. And I guess that there's also DNA and bones and stuff like that. I don't know if he's going that. I wonder how far he's going with that whole. He might be going all the way with all that. Um, yeah, that was interesting, but I think that also shows that messy Imamura style where it's like there are just things that don't quite fit, and that but he'll just throw in, and because you're kind of following this police procedural uh, story almost, but then you're digressing and then you're going to family elements and you're going into all these things, and then near the end you're kind of closing back off, and then there's that scene with okay the father and uh, the daughter-in-law and wow, and like seeing him in prison, and then you go to the scene where they're outside and they're uh, kind of throwing out his ashes, which is very interesting because most places it would be ash, but they have whole pieces of bone. They're throwing it out, so the whole thing is this strange way to end because before that you have this very tense, almost noirish confrontation thing in the prison, and then it's like now it's outside and he's been killed, and then they're throwing it out, and then it's just bones.
But maybe that bones didn't again burn because this kind of spirit of him, that type of individual, just kind of will always be in the society, and violence will always exist in the society, and these animalistic desires will always exist in the society.
Yeah,
And of course, bones, like when we think about the, oh god, what's the word like in English? Like the Stone Ages and stuff, obviously bones are part of that kind of imagery, but obviously the Stone Ages and those, like those early days of humanity, that was all about the animalistic desires. So this kind of good kind of reference that kind of how humans used to be before these types of societies were even built. So
yeah, yeah, that's true.
but this might be just overanalyzing it. But I mean, but yeah, you can interpret films however one wants. So.
No, I don't think that's overanalyzing. I think there is a continuity that he wants to show. I think you can sense that. I don't think he's or even more. I don't. It doesn't seem like in the storytelling they're trying to say, "Oh well, this was a unique, one-time only thing." While I don't think Iwao was like, "Oh, the world is full of Iwaos" either. I think it's walking the balance. I think that's again in the thing. It's walking of a balance of the things that what's how much is societal and then how much is him. But also I think there was this point you made about uh, preying on the weak, or like violence against the weak, and him kind of trying to exert uh, yeah, and not caring about people. But I think that this there it was interesting because you have characters, especially the wealthy guy, the who landowner or whatever he might be, who is helping fund this inn that Haru is running, and of course he's having that affair with Haru, and it's pretty much quid pro quo, all right? That she has this physical relationship with him, and he gives her money and protection and all of that, and that man, in a certain sense, is way more sleazy. You would think, right? The way he acts. First of all his strength is not coming from any kind of prowess, but just his money. Uh, and he is just trying to. He just likes owning things, so he wants to own Haru. He doesn't seem to care about people at all. So I do think that there is a little bit of contrasting going on between okay, we are seeing Iwao as this very harsh and unfeeling and violent and serial killer and then on a crime spree and on an escapade and all this kind this beast on the hunt almost, right? uh this beast being hunted down, yet he is maybe not the worst sort of beast or animal that exists in society.
Yeah. And I think kind of how, again, like I talked about earlier, how people still want to be in his company and stuff, that kind of shows that maybe each of us have maybe little longing for this type of violence, or at least we understand it in a way. But then there are these individuals who kind of do the violence, while some people maybe look at the violence from the sidelines, but kind of uh, understand it and maybe accept it. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, either they have no choice but to accept it, or some might be attracted and interested by it as well, or some may just want the protection of it. So I think the complexity is there, that there isn't any one reason why someone might be want to be next to a serial killer even after they know they're a serial killer. Uh, but they are showing multiple reasons why there'd be killers and why there would be people still having relationships with the killers, because I think that that question is always there. And the other thing I also thought that was valuable in this is that I think a lot of times, even in current day, we have this almost mischaracterization of Darwinism and the strongest survive and all that, and that that's the way to be. And if you don't believe this kind of universal general law, then you're the one who's the fool, and you're off track. And in this film, you get to see what that actually would mean versus the way people talk about it. So people talk about it in, oh well, you need to be responsible. If something goes wrong, you're responsible for it, and if something didn't work out, it's because you were weaker and you weren't strong enough and all that. And they try to defend certain ideas with this theory or this philosophy. But in this film, when you see Iwao's world, you and Haru's world, you see the brutality of a true system that's just built on kill or be killed, and you're either strong or you're weak. And would we actually want a world that's fully like that? Or when people talk about, oh well, it's the strongest survive, and they talk about it in the business world or something like that. Are how in a way this could mock what they're saying, because it's like you're saying that, but that's not the truth. You're not like living that truth. You are using it and thinking about it in this sanitized way, and not the way it would look like if that was actually the case.
Yeah, and the thing about the strongest survive is that there is such a huge kind of luck factor in life that we can never have like a full on meritocracy, because there's always so much luck involved. Like, well, already even before you are like born, there's like who are your parents, and will you get any like inheritable or heritable diseases or something like that. So there's this kind of luck factor in life, even like prenatal life when you are still in your mother's womb, and then after there is even more, like again how you will be raised and what type of people are around you, and do you have the silver spoon in your hand or not. So that's a big part of the kind of survival as well. It's just pure luck. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the other thing was, uh, I guess, the central conflict between him and his father is really that his father is not, obviously not even close to perfect, or anything like that, or not necessarily above his own dishonesty and hypocrisies, yet he does manage to control, be able to control impulses, whereas Iwao just fully gives into them. I think there's also this conflict that its father is showing this other way of being. Like, okay, if you are meek, for example, or you are oppressed, or you don't have power, you can still go on in life as a powerless individual. And I think that might be one of the things that's like anathema to Iwao. It's this, no, why would you want to accept that? Like, there's no accepting this. There's only railing against it. But then at the same time, as we were discussing earlier, ultimately we are shown Iwao's cowardice because he is not really able to go up against what he really has a problem with.
Yeah, and I think no individual could do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a very, very layered and deep film for a thriller like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
think that's what's great about it. That while it's in the guise of a thriller, I think it's much more than that. Yet it's still made really well and paced really well and shot really well. So it's still engaging and entertaining, and while building all this in as well.
Yeah, often these types of films are just about like masculinity and then some surface level kind of societal corruption or whatever, but this has way more to offer than that. So
Yeah, yeah. Imamura gives us a true kind of much more complex picture of not just individual, but individual in society and society itself, and a certain social strata as well, and all the different kind of social issues and challenges going on in these like mini microcosms. Like, he's using the microcosm to show a general uh, issues that occur in different pockets around Japan. So it's like almost like he's used that, and I guess we don't. I don't know enough about it to get into it, but I think that there is something to the fact that history takes them to different parts of Japan, and then every time he's showing us those different parts of Japan, he's giving us a little tour of Japan, but almost like an alternate tour of Japan, and and and, and that as well. So of course, I mean, he wasn't doing it for the non-Japanese per se, but even for the Japanese viewer, he was maybe sharing parts of Japan that they might not be aware of, or they might have certain conceptions about, and maybe he's trying to um, kind of challenge that as well.
yeah, definitely. But I'll say here in the end that to people that we had some audio issues and stuff, so I don't know how much it will show. And I think if it shows a lot, I'll definitely edit something in the beginning as well to make that clear, because usually we just film these like in kind of one sitting without any kind of cuts or breaks, but this time there will be a couple of cuts, but yeah, we'll see how it will look. It's hard to say now, but yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, it was interesting to discuss Imamura. Finally, we added another Japanese director to our canon, you could say, and definitely more to come in the future, so look out for that. And let us know what you think of this film, if you have seen it, or what you think about Imamura's other work. Still more to discover there as well. Like I said, I've seen 7, I think, so 20 or so more to watch, so yeah.
Yeah, I still have quite a few to see in his as well.
Yeah.
I've seen like a handful of his films.
But anyway, thanks for watching. Don't drink Coke at all. Sayonara and arigato gozaimashita.